Hi, I'm Danielle. Welcome to my perfume journal. In this video, I'm going to share my small but mighty collection of miniature vintage perfumes. So full disclosure, some of these perfumes are vintage scents, but the minis themselves I don't think are actually vintage. And others are both vintage scents and the mini bottles are also vintage. I shared in a previous video that even though I love vintage perfumes, I am really cautious about buying them for a few reasons. One, they can be really expensive, especially perfumes that are more rare and hard to find. As an example, I have been searching for an original bottle of Lauren from Ralph Lauren for ages, and they run anywhere from like $250 to $600. I am a perfume collector, but I am not that kind of a collector. I definitely have my spending limits, especially on something as risky as vintage. Which leads me to the second reason why I'm very cautious about buying vintages, and that's because I have been burned by purchasing bottles online. They've arrived and I find out that they're in poor condition scent-wise. Some vintage perfumes hold up really, really well over time, like opium, for example, while others, specifically certain florals or perfumes with top notes that can go really rancid, they can end up being a total disappointment. And it can become a very dangerous financial game to chase vintage perfumes. And then finally, I'm cautious about adding vintages to my collection because sometimes I don't actually want to wear the perfume that I'm seeking. I might be looking to recall a specific nostalgic scent or compare an original formulation to a current one, or maybe I want to try a vintage perfume that I have just never smelled before. So miniatures can be a great option for vintage lovers because they're easy to find, they're much less expensive. You can sometimes find them for like less than $10, though usually they're between like $10 and $20 or $25. That seems to be the average price for a mini. And you also get a very cute little bottle to look at. So now let me tell you a little bit about these miniatures, which are some of my favorite vintage scents. So we'll start with Anais from Cacharel, which came out in 1978. This was one of my most worn scents in the 1980s. And even though I think there are a lot of people who really, really dislike this perfume, I still love it. Anais is a powdery, fresh, white floral fragrance. And for this video, when I share note lists, I'm going to share the notes of the original formulations as I have been able to find them, not the notes of any current formulations. So for Anais, the notes are hyacinth, galbanum, lily, bergamot, black currant, citrus fruits, lavender, lemon, lily of the valley, carnation, honeysuckle, orris root, ylang ylang, jasmine, orange blossom, rose, tuberose, and iris, and musk, oak moss, sandalwood, amber, cedar, vetiver, frankincense, leather, and patchouli. So 80s. So I think a lot of people find this perfume to be very sharp and very angular, but other people find it to be very soft. And I think it all depends on the era in which you cut your teeth on perfumes. So for those of us out here who grew up on these strong, loud florals, this perfume at the time actually just felt like a whisper. This was everyone's like first teenage perfume, but nowadays people describe this as mature, which I find so interesting, how our upbringings shape the way we perceive everything, including scent. This perfume actually felt almost juvenile in the 80s as we were surrounded by things like Giorgio Beverly Hills and Poison and White Diamonds, not to mention all the loud Estee Lauder perfumes. So I think that this is still a beautiful, soft white floral. Yes, I said soft. And I definitely would like to pick up a full bottle of this, as I think the current version is still just fine with me, and I would happily wear this again. So before I talk about this perfume, I forgot to mention when I was talking about Anais that for each of these perfumes, I'm going to pop up a vintage magazine ad for each of them, because at the time, magazine ads were like all we had to go by to find out about these perfumes. I mean, yes, there were television ads, but really we got most of our information about perfumes from magazine ads, and they were really phenomenal at the time. This is the beautiful classic Magie Noire from Lancôme, which also came out in 1978, but it could not be further from Anais in its style. So the original Magie Noire Parfum comes in the most beautiful bottle I have ever seen in my life. It's the one that's in this magazine ad, and I think it is magnificent, both the bottle and the scent. So the notes of Magie Noire are green notes, bergamot, blackcurrant, hyacinth, and raspberry, honey, ylang ylang, iris, jasmine, lily of the valley, narcissus, rose, and tuberose, and oak moss, patchouli, castoreum, benzoin, civet, musk, and vetiver. This video is going to be like 40 minutes long just from the note lists. And you know what is totally wild to me? So many perfumes from the 70s and 80s had extremely similar note lists, but they all smelled completely different. Whereas I have a hard time distinguishing some of the new releases today that have similar note lists. And I guess, again, that is another byproduct of your life experience. I bet the people who are cutting their teeth on today's perfumes will say the exact same thing in 40 years that I am saying right now. We all love what we love based on our own memories and our own experiences. So anyway, Magie Noire is exactly what the name suggests. It is dark magic. It is an absolute cauldron of scent, with all of the notes swirling together in the most hypnotic way. It is mossy, resinous, woody. It is leathery. The florals are intoxicating, and there are plenty of green and aromatic qualities to this perfume. This is kind of like if you put this on and then you looked at yourself in the mirror, you would see like a hazy, protective scent bubble surrounding you. It would be almost visible. And so this is an absolutely stunning vintage chic. Next is LouLou from Cacharel. LouLou is a late 80s icon. It came out in 1987, and it is iconic not just for the scent, but also this bottle. So how do you describe LouLou? LouLou is not shy, I can tell you that. Listen to the notes. Cassia, cinnamon, jasmine, lily, plum, violet, aniseed, iris, and mimosa, heliotrope, tuberose, orange blossom, ylang ylang, orris root, marigold, benzoin, musk, sandalwood, vanilla, and frankincense. So to me, the notes that stand out most in LouLou are the spices, the cinnamon and the aniseed, then that sultry combination of jasmine, lily, plum, and tuberose. And then you get that sweet but also powdery heliotrope, orris, benzoin, vanilla combo. This perfume smells mysterious. It smells lush. It is very, very dense. This is one of those transition from teenager to adult perfumes, the kind of perfume you want to wear at that stage in your life when you're like, I am grown now and I want to smell like it. So this is the Cacharel that you would wear after Anais in the 80s. LouLou is not for the faint of heart. I still think it is absolutely beautiful and one of Cacharel's best creations ever. Okay, so this is Paloma Picasso from Paloma Picasso, and yes, she is the artist Pablo Picasso's daughter. So this perfume came out in 1984, and I think it kind of straddles the line between those really green, mossy sheeps of the 1970s and then the super floral aldehydic sheeps that define the 80s. This is very deep, very spicy. I sort of liken this to the original Fendi, which came out later in 1987. The notes are angelica, carnation, coriander, bergamot, neroli, rose, and lemon, patchouli, hydrangea, jasmine, mimosa, and ylang ylang, and oak moss, woods, amber, honey, sandalwood, and vetiver. And this perfume smells exactly like this ad that is associated with it. It's Paloma Picasso in this coiffed, smooth black bob with a total 80s makeup beat, wearing these red gloves, holding her face in her hands. And I think if you mention Paloma Picasso to anyone in the 80s, this is what they would envision. This is a very, very dramatic floral perfume with that spicy carnation, the indolic jasmine, and then that honeyed, deep, woody base. This is a boss babe perfume. It is very confident, very assertive, and altogether very, very beautiful. Okay, I totally forgot to put this one on the tray. This is a vintage mini of Silences from Jacomo, and this came out in 1978. So the notes of this perfume are green notes, galbanum, bergamot, lemon, and orange blossom, hyacinth, iris, jasmine, lily of the valley, and rose, and moss, musk, and cedarwood. And just from reading this, you might expect a very pretty floral perfume, but don't let the note list fool you. This is wildly green. It is bitter and sharp and mossy. This is like the whole forest floor. I would call this similar to Bondy from Robert Piguet, which is probably the greenest of the greens. The difference is that this one is not at all aldehydic. This is deep and dark, but it's not dank. That's where the florals come in. They keep the perfume from going into like a mildewy, dank territory. I love this perfume to bits, and I think it's one of the best green perfumes I've ever smelled. So I saved the best two for last. Now, even though this is my favorite perfume of all time, I'm going to start with Niki de Saint Phalle. So for a while, this little mini was all I had in my life to remind me of my beloved favorite scent. But I have since gotten a full bottle of this perfume that is in perfect condition, and I'm so happy that I can wear it again without having to ration it out in like little tiny drops. Niki de Saint Phalle came out in 1982. It's a green floral sheep. Do you see a theme here? I love green floral sheeps. So the notes are artemisia, green notes, mint, bergamot, peach, orris root, carnation, cedar, jasmine, patchouli, rose, ylang-ylang, oak moss, amber, leather, musk, and sandalwood. So I will say that this perfume is probably for most people going to be a love it or hate it kind of perfume. In fact, I even went through a period of time where I had to put this one to the side because it was actually giving me headaches. And in reviews, I have seen this perfume compared to Diarella, to Magie Noire, to Bondy, to Ivoire de Balmain. And I would say that all of that and none of that is true because Niki de Saint Phalle is in a class of its own. To me, what stands out in this perfume is you get some freshness from the green notes. They borderline bitter, but they don't actually ever really get there. And then you get a little bit of fruitiness from the peach. You get a soft powderiness from the orris and the rose. You get spiciness from the carnation. And then my favorite part is this gorgeous creaminess in the dry down from the amber and the sandalwood. And I am definitely biased because this perfume is pretty much part of my DNA at this point in time. But to me, Niki de Saint Phalle is one of the most beautiful and unique vintage perfumes ever. And finally, this is a mini of Lauren from Ralph Lauren, which came out in 1978. So this perfume actually makes me want to cry because it is such a defining scent in my life. Like, I love Niki de Saint Phalle. It is my favorite perfume ever because of its uniqueness. But Lauren actually holds more significance than Niki in terms of memories for me. Of all the perfumes I loved in the 80s, I wore Lauren for the longest. I wore it the most. And that is why I am more attached to this perfume than any other perfume from the decade. So first of all, Lauren was wildly popular among all age groups. There was that like prep equestrian style of the 1980s everywhere. There was this really popular book called The Preppy Handbook. The styles were featured in 17 magazine. And then the fashion was also emulated in like a ton of those Brat Packer movies. And no other scent was as representative of this style than Lauren. And back then, there were plenty of places where you could purchase Ralph Lauren. I mean, yeah, there was like Ralph Lauren Couture and all of that, but there was also like regular everyday Ralph Lauren clothing that you could find at department stores. It was kind of like maybe the Tommy Hilfiger of its time, so to speak. And so this perfume was ubiquitous. I do not know of a single person who did not wear this scent. And as for me, I wore it almost daily. I went through many bottles of this over the years, and I loved it so much. So the notes in Lauren are green notes, clary sage, pineapple, rosewood, lily of the valley, jasmine, Bulgarian rose, cyclamen, lilac, and violet, and carnation, cedar, oak moss, sandalwood, and vetiver. So I'm going to have a really hard time putting this perfume into words. It is all at once green and fresh. It is sweet, it is floral, it is a little bit spicy and slightly woody. So the florals are really cheerful. They're almost animated, but they're not juvenile. This is a very classic and classy scent that works for literally anyone. And if a perfume fairy appeared out of nowhere and said, I'm going to grant you one wish. You can bring back one perfume and one perfume only from your past. You can have an endless supply of it, and it's going to be in its original formulation. I would not even hesitate for a second. Lauren would be my choice. So I hope you enjoyed this video about some of my favorite vintage perfumes in miniature form. I enjoyed taking this little trip down memory lane with these scents. Thank you so much for watching, for spending your time here with me, and for chatting perfumes with me in the comments. I appreciate you. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.